Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 871 for May 17th, 2021. Coming up in a few minutes.
When we first got into this, we didn't realize what we were totally getting into, and we just took, everything we do, we put everything into it just like we did our hockey careers and paid attention to all the details.
That attention to detail has paid off for Hockey Hall of Fame goalie Ed Belfour, his son Dayn, and daughter Reaghan. One of their Belfour Spirits whiskies won a double gold medal in the recent San Francisco World Spirits competition. To get double gold, the judging panel has to be unanimous in awarding a gold medal to a spirit. And unlike most whiskeys that have a celebrity or athlete's name on the bottle, the Belfours actually make their whiskeys themselves. I caught up with Ed and Dayn Belfour before an appearance this week in Detroit, and we'll hear from them later on WhiskyCast In-Depth, including Ed's answer to the question of which one he treasures more, winning the Stanley Cup, an Olympic gold medal, or that double gold medal from the judges in San Francisco. The answer might just surprise you. We'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Your Voice, and on Behind the Label.
It's obviously a fairly unusual process, but there's certainly been a lot of consternation around whether it's really it's so innovative that it could have been patented.
The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Hiya, Mark. How's my favourite Redbreast fan doing? Look, I'm going to address the elephant in the room right away. We both know your podcast is dying for a co-host, and I know just the lad who can be the Robin to your Batman. How's that for dropping a hint?
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast, Redbreast. Pass it on.
Hi, I'm Gabriel from Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey. I love sharing stories about Dewar's, and our newest innovation, Portuguese Smooth, has a great one. It's the tale of Scotland and Portugal, centuries of tradition meeting in one delicious bottle. Curious? Try for yourself. You won't be disappointed.
Let's get started with the news. Just 2 weeks left to resolve the dispute between the United States and its European trading partners over steel and aluminum tariffs before the U.S. whiskey industry gets slammed again on June 1st. That's when the European Union and Great Britain are scheduled to double their tariffs on imports of American-made whiskeys from 25% to 50%. The original tariffs were imposed in 2018 after the Trump administration slapped tariffs on imported steel and aluminum to protect the U.S. steel industry. U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai has been talking with her counterparts in Brussels and London about the global steel oversupply issue that led to the tariffs, but there has been no real progress on resolving the dispute. During a Senate Finance Committee hearing Wednesday and a House Ways and Means Committee hearing on Thursday, Tai said the Biden administration is committed to supporting domestic steel producers and did not directly address the issue of the retaliatory tariffs. Meanwhile, we are now about halfway into the 4-month-long pause on the U.S. tariffs that affected single malt whiskeys from Scotland and Northern Ireland, along with other European-made spirits and liqueurs. Both sides agreed to suspend their tariffs while they try to hammer out a solution to the dispute over subsidies to Boeing and Airbus. The whiskey industry has become collateral damage in that dispute, and the tariffs could return in July unless there's an agreement in place. Ambassador Tai talked with EU Trade Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis about resolving the dispute Friday and expressed optimism during Thursday's House hearing that can still happen.
I'm very serious about accomplishing a resolution in these 4 months so that we don't even need to talk about whether or not we would need to reintroduce the tariffs because we haven't met our goal. I very much am hopeful and will do everything that we can in our power to make sure that we do arrive at the goal within this 4-month period.
The U.S. tariffs led to a 35% decline in Scotch whiskey exports to the U.S. before they were suspended. Last month, we reported that 2 unions representing workers at the Chivas Brothers facilities in Scotland were asking their members to approve a strike. Members of Unite and GMB Scotland have now overwhelmingly approved that strike over salary disputes. The Pernod Ricard division imposed a pay freeze late last year during the pandemic, and union leaders are upset that Pernod Ricard later gave pay raises to workers at some of its facilities in France. The company says it's offered a fair proposal to the unions with guaranteed pay raises in 2021 and 2022. No date has been publicly announced for strikes to begin, but Unite said on its website that walkouts could begin at the end of this month. Also on the labor front, a federal judge in Portland has ruled in favor of striking Teamsters union members at Hood River Distillers in Oregon. The judge sided with the National Labor Relations Board in ordering the distillery to restart bargaining with the union and offer striking workers their jobs back. Workers walked off the job in March of last year after contract talks broke down, and Hood River unilaterally imposed new salary scales and benefits. The union later ended its strike, but Hood River hired replacement workers during the strike and has only rehired union members when jobs open up. No word yet on whether the company plans to appeal that ruling. In other news, Ireland's Dingle Distillery is planning a major expansion. The distillery is asking Kerry County Council to approve what would essentially be a ground-up rebuild of the entire site. Dingle has outgrown its original tin shed that opened in 2012, and distillery manager Graham Cool says the project would include expanded production capacity as well as a real visitors center.
It'll give us the foundations for the future as well. You know, as much as a whiskey, you need to have your premises needs to be fit for purpose. And, I think if anybody's ever been to Dingle and seen the blue shed, it's really, it doesn't owe us anything, that's for sure. So a bit of a titivate up and a bit more to offer the visitors will go down well, I think.
The distillery currently welcomes visitors at a small shack outside of the distillery, with a small gift shop inside. And Graham Cool says they have had to turn away guests in the past because of a lack of space. Assuming the county approves the project, work would likely begin early next year. That word comes just as Dingle has released its latest single malt, one that reflects a change for the distillery. It'll be a permanent expression, replacing the batches that have come out on a regular basis since the distillery's first single malt release back in 2016. Cool told me it's easier to keep one regular whiskey on the market instead of having to start over with a new release every so often, and it also helps with managing the cask inventory. There'll be no age statement on the whiskey, though.
It's 6 or 7 year old whiskey, which, I would have no issue with putting a number on the bottle, but for some customers, consumers, it may put them off, and you don't want to put people off. And I think, age statements have become less important over the last few years. People are more interested in what the whiskey is made of and where it came from rather than the fact it's 10 years or 12 years old.
The new Dingle single malt is available now in Ireland and is on the way to key export markets as well. There are plans to have it available in the U.S. in time for the holidays. Saturday's World Whiskey Day brought the 4th annual release of Redbreast's Dream Cask Single Pot Still Irish Whiskey. This year's release is a 29-year-old whiskey that started out in a combination of ex-bourbon, sherry, and ruby port casks, then was finished for 15 months in a single Oloroso cask. 924 500-milliliter bottles will go on sale starting Monday to members of the Birdhouse, Redbreast's online affinity group, at €520 a bottle. Unfortunately, they will not be available in the U.S. Stouning's Danish whiskies are not new in Europe, but they will soon be making their debut in the U.S. The Stouning Rye, Chaos Triple Malt, and Smoke Single Malt whiskies will be available for the first time in the U.S. starting in June. Recommended retail prices range from $79.99 to $99.99 a bottle. Douglas Lang & Company is out with the summer 2021 release of Big Pete, its Islay blended malt. It's been dubbed the Petrichor edition. That comes from petrichor, the word that describes the scent that comes from rain falling on dry soil. Around 5,000 bottles will be available worldwide. There is no word on pricing. Old Forester is jumping into the direct-to-consumer market now that Kentucky's new law allowing direct shipping from distillers across state lines is in effect. It's starting off with a quarterly release of Old Forester Single Barrel, which normally is only available at the Distillery on Louisville's Whiskey Row, along with a handful of Kentucky retailers. It is selling for $59.99 a bottle if you live in one of the few states where reciprocal shipping agreements are in place. As of now, the distillery is only allowed to ship to Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Dakota, and Washington, D.C. We will not see the first release of Keeper's Heart Whiskey out of O'Shaughnessy Distilling in Minneapolis until July, but there is news out of the new Minnesota distillery this week. That's because High West Distillery founder David Perkins has signed on as a collaborator to work alongside former Middleton master distiller Brian Nation. Perkins left High West after selling the Utah distillery back in late 2016 to Constellation Brands. He's been consulting with small distilleries since then.
I met the O'Shaughnessy's about 5, 6, 7 years ago. They were doing their homework as they are a homework type of family, and they called me out of the blue and told me what they were thinking about and asked advice. And I didn't really think much of it until I got a call, maybe a year ago, and they said, "Wow, we just hired Brian." And I'm like, "What on earth?" And I reached out to Brian after that because I'd met him about 10 years ago, and I thought, what a cool thing. If they could actually pull Brian in, these guys are really serious. And, I talked to Brian and we got to talking about whiskey and what he was doing. And, he said, "Would you like to help?" And I said, "Well, why not?" So anyway, it's kind of that simple.
So basically you're working as a consultant alongside them. Are you going to have a full-time role at the place? What exactly is this going to entail being a liquid collaborator?
Fair enough. I mean, no, I will not be employed full time because I do enjoy the other things I'm doing right now. But as much as they want to work with me, look, these guys they are A+ people, and their goal is to make nothing less than a world-class whiskey. And I really like the premise behind it. It's driven by the Irish triple pot still distillation, and really, as I was talking with Brian, these guys are going to Irishize American whiskey and Americanize Irish whiskey and blend sort of the best of both. And I thought, what fun. And who better guy than Brian to work with? I have a man crush on Brian. So why wouldn't you want to work with Brian on something? I tell you, he's such a talented guy. And, you think of the word master. Master is a guy that understands cause and effect and, what goes in and what comes out. And, Brian's been doing this for longer than I have. And that's what I'm excited about. So working with a guy like that doesn't come every day.
Keeper's Heart will be a blend of Irish pot still and grain whiskies with American rye whiskey, and will start out using sourced whiskey until the spirit from the O'Shaughnessy Distillery is mature. The distillery is set to start production in July as well. Car lovers were keeping an eye on the Mecum Auctions auction this week in Indianapolis, but so were whiskey lovers. That's because barrel number 1 of Whistle Pig Rye's Beyond Bonded rye whiskey went on the auction block with the proceeds to benefit Farm Aid. The whiskey was distilled from grain grown on the Whistle Pig Farm in Vermont and matured for 4 years and 8 months in Vermont oak casks. The auction package included 200 bottles of whiskey, along with the empty barrel and a trip to Whistle Pig Farm. The winning bid, $44,840. By the way, Beyond Bonded will be released later this spring. And finally, Colin Ross was one of the mainstays of the Scotch whisky industry as managing director at Ben Nevis Distillery since 1989. He also worked at Strathisla, Laphroaig, and Tormore distilleries during a career that started at Strathisla back in 1965. Colin died last week at the age of 82. I interviewed him back in 2013, and we talked about how whiskey has changed over the years.
When I was at Laphroaig, the manager from Lagavulin was leaving to take up a position at Glenkinchie Distillery. We went up to wish him all the best, a group of the managers on the island before he would leave. And while we were there, he said, we've just got the very thing, boys. And this was a bottle of malt mill, the sister distillery to Lagavulin. In his opinion, it had been produced before the First World War. The bottling date was shown as about 1924 or something. And the whiskey had been opened, there had been a little bit taken out. But he poured us all a little taste, and it really was completely different from the whiskies in most places today. It wasn't fiery, it wasn't harsh, it was just so smooth that it went down like, I don't know, like nectar from the gods, to quote from our video. And it was so good that he said, I know this sample should be left at the distillery, but come on, it's too good. And we finished the bottle.
I can't say as I blame you.
It was a lovely drop of stuff, and I do think it was different from what's being produced today.
You can listen to the entire interview with Colin Ross in episode 435 from July of 2013. It's in the archives at whiskycast.com. He is survived by his wife Rosie and 2 children, along with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We send our thoughts to them and his many friends in the whiskey industry. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com. If you missed Friday night's Happy Hour live webcast with longtime drinks writer F. Paul Packelt, the on-demand replay is available at the WhiskyCast YouTube channel. He's about to publish a new version of his classic book, Kindred Spirits. A new Kindred Spirits will be released on June 1st. You can also join us this Friday night at 5 p.m. New York time for our next live webcast. It's available on our YouTube channel, the WhiskyCast Facebook page, Twitter, or Twitch. Time now for the calendar of events brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. We do have a couple of event cancellations to let you know about. The Bergen Whiskey and Beer Festival that was planned for May 28th and 29th in Bergen, Norway, has now been canceled for 2021 because of the pandemic. The organizers have already announced plans to try again next January. And the Stoke-on-Trent Whiskey Festival that had been planned for July 10th in England has now been canceled. While England's current health restrictions are set to be relaxed next month, the existing restrictions made it impossible for the organizers to put together this year's event in time. Now, here's what is still happening. The Our Whiskey Virtual Festival continues this Thursday with a New Kids on the Block tasting. Teeling Whiskey Company in Dublin, Ireland, has its Wonders of Wood virtual tasting that same night. Bonham's has whiskey auctions this Friday in Hong Kong and on June 1st in Edinburgh, Scotland. Ardbeg's Monsters of Smoke Tour has stops in Florida through the end of this month, along with a visit to the Kansas City area next week. The Beer, Bourbon, and Barbecue Festival is in Tyson's Corner, Virginia this Saturday. And, of course, the Last Chat with Jim McEwen takes place online this Sunday. While there will not be an Isla Festival of Malt and Music on the island this year, There are virtual events planned between May 28th and June 5th. And Whiskey Live Canberra is still on for May 28th and 29th in Australia's capital city. Right now, we have 184 live and virtual events on the searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. The calendar of events is brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. You'll find their Roundstone Rye at fine whiskey shops in 26 U.S. states, 3 continents, and online. Visit the Where to Buy page at catoctincreekdistilling.com to find a retailer near you. And please drink responsibly.
The story of Dewar's Portuguese Smooth is also the story of Stephanie McLeod, winner of the Master Blender of the Year award for the past 2 years and the first woman to win the award, period. Stephanie dreamed up the curious idea of finishing 8-year-old Dewar's Scotch in port barrels, and when Stephanie has an idea, it's usually a good one. The result is like nothing else you've ever tasted, with hints of apricots and honeydew melon, red cherries, and rich vanilla. It's a celebration of Portugal and Scotland, and life in general, so grab a bottle and start writing some stories of your own.
Coming up in a few minutes, we'll look at a dispute pitting Australian distillers against the country's largest distillery over a distilling method that it has patented. That's just ahead on Behind the Label. Right now, WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Oban. Back in September of 2019, Hockey Hall of Fame goalie Ed Belfour joined us on episode 784. He had just launched Belfour Spirits with his son Dayn and daughter Reaghan after selling off most of the memorabilia from his hockey career to fund their entry into the whiskey business. They make their ryes and bourbons at Southern Distilling in Statesville, North Carolina. And a couple of weeks ago, the San Francisco World Spirits Competition announced its 2021 winners. Their special edition straight rye earned a double gold medal. That means the entire judging panel unanimously awarded it a gold medal in blind tasting. I caught up with Ed and Dayn Belfour by phone while they were in Detroit for bottle signings this week. Last time around, I mentioned during the news that they have just released their first straight bourbon, and that's where we started the conversation. This is your first big release since the initial launch. Tell me about how you guys created this one.
Yeah, so it's our wheated mash bill, same as our pecan finished bourbon. And what we did is we selected some very unique barrels out of our 2,700 barrels, and ended up being, I think, 92 barrels, Dayn? 95 barrels total. And we just played with those unique flavor profiles, and we created this small batch. We started testing right around 105 proof, and proofed it all the way down to 95. We wanted a product to be 100 or above, but we proofed it down to 95 just to see how it did down there. And the sweet spot was 100.5 proof. So we're really happy that it settled in there. That's where the sweet spot was. It's very easy and smooth to drink at that proof point. Dayn, you can tell them all about the nuances and the characteristics of the
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. And again, thanks for having us. It's always good to be on here catching up with some good folks. But like Dad said, this is a 100.5 product. The mash bill 60-30-10, so 60 corn, 30 wheat, 10 malted barley. On the nose, always is going to have a little bit of that honeysuckle present for us. And what's really unique is that I actually defer to my sister on this because she pulled gardenia, a nice floral presence on the nose out for this product. And the body is very sweet body, very caramel-like on the nose, leading into the flavor profile of the body, and a nice little, almost like a graham crackery finish with a little bit of a white pepper finish. Really love the way it kind of dances across the tongue. You're not going to get struck with any obnoxious or negative alcohol notes. It's really going to just delicately grace across your palate and finishes very nicely. And if you are going to drop a big rock or a sphere in there to drink it on the rocks, incredibly, we find that as it proofs down, some subtle, almost peaty, smoky notes are starting to exploit itself.
A lot of nice smoke.
So that's something that we're really damn proud of. You definitely get the characteristics of the barrel, and take my hat off to Dad. Dad he's the mad scientist when it comes to perfecting the profile of the barrel with all the toast and the char levels and overall the sourcing of where our oak comes from.
And I find, Mark, when we let it sit there and open up a little bit, it's amazing how the beautiful aromas you get off of this product. It's a lot stronger than our other products that we have in the sense of the maple. I get a lot of maple out of it and brown sugar. We were sitting there last night having a couple sips of it, and I was just like amazed, because I love those beautiful maple aromas and the brown sugar and caramels. I don't know where Reaghan got the gardenia, but my nose isn't quite as good as hers is. But gardenia was an interesting fact. But it's a very smooth and easy drink with a lot of character. So we're very proud of it.
Yeah, and we get into the situations, Mark, where we're used to drinking our rye and our pecan bourbons, and we're seeing how those are evolving and in the direction that we want them to. And we're finally at the point where we can give the people what they want with a small batch straight bourbon. And I remember Dad and I's first sip, and we kind of look at each other after we have a neat pour together, and I'm like, this is going to frickin' hurt somebody, because it's so damn good. You find yourself going to reach for the bottle again quicker than you would expect, just to try to meander through all those aromatic and flavor palatability notes. It's just very complex, and it's very delicate at the same time. But this is a drink that you're not going to lose, even in a cocktail. I'm a big mixologist fan. I love classic cocktails like the old fashioned, sours and Manhattans, and but I'll never knock pouring great bourbon or great rye into a great cocktail. I'm just a firm believer of the alcohol industry ultimately together, and this drink really stands up well, whether it's neat, whether it's on the rocks, or in a nice mixed drink. So in the classical sense, of course. So really, really proud, really, really excited to see how we'll see the way that the folks and the people out there really respond to this product.
Well, I can guess where Reaghan got the gardenia from, and you guys didn't, because I don't recall Reaghan taking too many pucks to the face over the years, so hitting the nose.
That's pretty fair. That's pretty fair, Mark.
Yeah, a few punches here and there, too.
I have to give you guys... Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ed.
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
My nose was broken, I think, 3 times. Dane's was broken. So.
Yeah, I don't got a straight nose here. I got a little bend and hook here and there on that thing.
Well, I have to give you guys credit, because unlike the number of other whiskeys that have come out with, for lack of a better term, celebrities, very prominent people who put their names on a bottle, you guys have actually made this stuff and gone to the trouble to distill it yourselves. And
absolutely,
I'd like to learn what you guys have learned over the last several years actually making these whiskeys. And I know, Dayn, you were really instrumental in doing that.
That's a great point there, Mark. We're confident, cocky athletes and hockey players, so we can do just about anything that anybody else can. That's our mindset about everything. That's how we approach everything. And again, I know we said this in the past, if we're going to put our name on something, it's going to be ours. And we're going to go through the ringer to try to develop our own profile so it reflects our own self. And I'll tell you, what I've learned so much about this industry is the amount of camaraderie that everybody ultimately has, from distiller to distiller or brand to brand, if you will. Everybody loves the industry. It's so fun. And it really reminds us about, being back in the locker room again or being on the ice. And what I am so thankful for is I have my father, who is crazy enough to take on the preparation of the barrels. They give us 60% of the matured flavor profile in the end as we're letting them, babies sit over time. And I have learned that when it comes to the distillation, the White Lightning, that's my magic. I love the White Lightning. I absolutely love White Dog or Moonshine or New Make. If I can make a nice presentable White Lightning at a specific proof point that really makes sense to me, where it's drinking almost like water, if you will. And then I give this White Lightning to Dad and I say, hey, Dad, rock with this a little bit and tell me what you think you want to go on toast and char levels, etc., for the barrels. Because I really think, this proof point's gonna give us a better matured product in the long run. And Dad and I will go back and forth, just, days turn into weeks, which turn into months in some cases, because we're that detailed. And attention to detail is something that I definitely am learning from my father here. Again, this is 100.5 product we're talking about here. It's not 100 proof. It's not 101 proof of our latest release, but it's 100.5. And that small, finite detail is really what's separating what we believe in our products being a great drink from being a freaking amazing or an awesome drink. So really focusing on the small details, of course, the cleanliness of everything. We take a little bit of an extra step and we try to put as much love as we can into our barrels. So I'm really proud to say that I believe Dad and I have learned that. It's been 8 years almost, and I never thought, how the heck did we get here? We got 2,700 barrels, babies sleeping, in the rack house, and I can't wait when they come to maturity to get it in a glass and get it in folks' hands and, share these celebratory moments. It's all about having that good time all the time with that drink.
Where they're at right now, a lot of our products now are over 3 years old, and that's for me, the details like Dayn is talking about. When we first got into this, we didn't realize what we were totally getting into, and we just took everything we do, we put everything into it just like we did our hockey careers, and paid attention to all the details like I did in my hockey career, and put forth that effort in the bourbon and rye whiskey. And I think, like Dayn's talking about, we didn't realize, the difference between one proof point was going to make that much of a difference in the flavor profile of the bourbon or the rye whiskey. And, the difference of one char level can make a difference on the aging of the product. These are all things that we've been finding out, with the research and development that we've been doing. And we're not afraid to do that because we want our products to be the best they can be. So we do a lot of research and development. We do a lot of, taste testing, blind taste testing, to try and create these beautiful aromas and these beautiful flavors that we've created, because we want to give that experience to our fans and our followers and to the new whiskey drinkers that are, getting into this world of beautiful bourbon and rye whiskey. So, it gives us great joy when we taste somebody that's not really a whiskey drinker and they're like, wow, this is a friggin' amazing drink. So, we love that moment when we see that smile on their face and they're totally surprised, and, it just gives us great pride.
So which is better, winning a Stanley Cup, an Olympic gold medal, or a double gold in the San Francisco World Spirits competition?
Well, that's a tough one. But, they each have their own. You got to understand, I played for the Stanley Cup since I was like 4 years old. And
street hockey, yeah.
First put on my first pair of skates. So that moment when Brett Hall scored that winning goal for the Dallas Stars was, truly an amazing lifetime moment. And, being part of Team Canada and representing your country definitely was right there, but, not quite as much as winning the Stanley Cup, of course. But, winning a double gold, with my family and working on this together for the last 8 years and all the hard work that goes in behind the scenes, and, the little failures that you have that, are just part of the business. Winning that double gold, brought tears to my eyes, and we were so emotional and just high-fiving one another and hugging, and, it is truly a very, very prestigious moment, and none more fitting to win it with our Fighting Sioux tribute bottle that we designed for my teammates and the Fighting Sioux fans of North Dakota, and it just made me so proud in every way. So believe me, it's something that is right up there with winning the Stanley Cup for sure.
I think, Mark, the only way that it would be better is if maybe we're so successful in, the spirits industry that we could one day, buy our own hockey team, win the Stanley Cup, and put the double gold in the Stanley Cup and drink it out of there. And that would probably be the best case scenario for us is if we could get that, because, we're still hockey boys, we're still diehard hockey boys. And I'm a Leaf Nation fan to my heart and core, and a Blackhawk, and we're still kids over here. We're just trying to make sure we got the drinks for the future parties that we're going to be having around the game. It's great to be back.
Last time we talked, Ed, you were planning on building a distillery in Kentucky. Where's that stand? I know the pandemic probably got in the way a little bit, but what's going on with the distillery?
That was a crazy time, of course, for everyone, and we were almost, finalized with the deal going to Kentucky. Then pandemic hit, and everything was just put on hold. I don't know. I always think things happen for a reason. That's the way I live my life, and maybe just at that moment it was, hey, let's reevaluate, and we did. We took a step back, and all of us live in Texas, and we won the Stanley Cup in Texas. My kids are all in Texas, and our whole team. So we reevaluated, and we are now working on building the distillery in Texas. Now, the exact spot, we've visited with many cities in Texas around the Dallas Metroplex and further south towards San Antonio. We've come across some really great opportunities. Nothing that we can share yet, but I would say within the next couple months here, there will be an announcement, hopefully.
Before or after the Stanley Cup is raised?
Hey, this might be a little bit perfectly timed, Mark. We're us crazy goalies. We're actually really kind of smart, if that's laughable to a forward or a defenseman here. But there might be a little bit of timing here for the release of that, Mark.
Well, since the playoffs start this weekend, any predictions?
Oh dear. You know what, Mark? I think the playoffs are. It's a different monster, man. I mean, you get a hot goalie, and on an average team, and that hot goalie can take you all the way to the finals. So you just never know in the playoffs. You get one or two guys that get sick or get injured a little bit, and those are like your star players or your goalie, and it makes it really difficult to predict. But they're the most exciting time of the year. I love the first round when just things are so up in the air,
high and intense.
Yeah,
it's the second round usually settles down a little bit, and then third, again it just picks up until you get to the finals, and it's just all out, balls to the wall, as us hockey players would say, and it's just an exciting time of the year. It's my favorite. I love it. I loved it as a player, and I love it as a fan now.
Yeah, simple plays. Get the pucks out when they need to get out. A little chip. Can't lose the puck 2 feet inside or outside the blue line. Got to maintain control and just make simple plays and fight for your brothers in arms there. And
it's usually whoever wants it the most.
Yeah,
Mark. It's like the guys that'll sacrifice, throwing their body in front of the puck and blocking shots and doing whatever it takes to win. Playing injured. I played with a lot of teammates that were getting shots in between periods and freezing different parts of the body that was injured to the point where they shouldn't be playing. And that's
hockey.
That's what it takes to win.
Okay, and you guys have managed to work every hockey cliche into that answer, but I didn't hear a prediction.
Oh God, dude. Well, you know what, Mark? I was watching the Jets, and I mean, they went on that slide. I was so damn worried for them, you know. And I mean, I would say
they're in though, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, we were buzzing around here the last couple of weeks drinking whiskey. Did they get in? I want to make sure they were.
I think they made it. They lost a bunch of games in a row right at the end, but I think they just slipped in. Is that right, Mark?
I think so. Yeah.
I
got to admit, my Flyers got knocked out a couple of weeks ago, so I haven't been paying much attention.
Oh, that's too bad.
Same as your Stars.
Yeah, I know. It's always great to see the Flyers in the playoffs, though, because they bring that extra intensity.
Yeah,
yeah, that's a fact. That's a fact. The bullies, they know how to do it.
Yeah.
So, do the Leafs finally end the drought this year? I know you're a Leafs fan, Dayn.
I would love to see it. You know what? If it could be a Canadian showdown, you know, I'm kind of more pulling for the Jets or the Leafs. I would love to see the Leafs take it. I mean, I'm such a Leaf Nation guy. Like when Dad played for the Leafs, and you know, I got to meet guys like Brian McCabe and Brian Leach and Ron Francis and even Dougie Gilmore was around, and Wendell Clark's always in and out, and like you get to meet the most authentic, nostalgic players. And when you realize that Toronto is arguably the hockey mecca of the frickin' world, and I had the opportunity to watch my dad wear a Maple Leaf jersey.
I think they would celebrate for like 2 months straight.
Yeah. I mean, for the whole frickin' year. I mean, can you imagine the party?
Yeah.
Even in lockdown times, they'd find a way to break the lockdown and celebrate.
Right.
I'm telling you, if the Leafs win, I'm running across the Canadian border, frickin' hooting and hollering. I don't care if they let me back in the U.S. I'm staying up there.
Let's bootleg that last barrel. That last barrel up there.
Hey, can you let us across? We've got whiskey for, our family.
Leaf Nation.
Go Leafs.
Okay, so a serious question now to end it. Since we're talking about Canada, I know, Ed, that you had dreams when we last talked about getting your whiskey into the Canadian market, and we've had folks up there asking when it's going to be available. Any progress on getting your whiskeys into Canada yet?
Well, we did have our deal all set to go to Canada through Southern, and then we found out that it has to be a minimum of 3 years aged. We didn't know that going to Southern, and I don't know why they didn't know that. But anyway, our products are 3 years old now. They're eligible to go to Canada. Now we're just waiting for the borders to open up with what's going on there. I was talking to Mom and Dad the other day, and just between provinces, folks aren't allowed to travel from province to province. They have the borders closed at each province. So, gee whiz, it's pretty tough for us to get in there right now, but we got our fingers crossed. Hopefully we'll be able to get in there sometime this summer. For me, for multiple reasons, I haven't seen my mom and dad in a long time, and they're getting older. They're 89 and 88 years old, and it's just a sad time when you can't go see your parents and they can't come down and see you. And again, we have a lot of fans there and relatives who have been asking us, when are you guys bringing your whiskey to Canada? We can't wait. And believe me, as soon as we get the green light from Prime Minister Trudeau, we'll be headed towards Canada. That's a fact.
Thanks to Ed and Dayn Belfour for spending some time with us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Oban. Every sip of Oban is like a postcard. Oban Single Malt Scotch Whiskey is offering the chance to immerse yourself in Oban and the whiskey-making process through the Oban Abode experience. 2 winners will receive a trip to Scotland to stay in the Oban Abode, located just steps from the distillery. To learn more and enter, visit obanabode.obanwhiskey.com. Complete rules are available at the website. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Angus McRailed, who has blogged for years under the pen name of The Whiskey Sponge, has also been working on his own independent bottlings along with Whiskey Auctioneer founder Ian McClune under the Decadent Drinks brand. I received samples of several of their bottlings the other day, including the new 10-year-old Equilibrium single malt. Now, keep in mind that Edredauer Distillery also distills peated single malts under its Balakin brand, because Equilibrium is a blend of a 2010 Edredauer First Fill ex-sherry butt with a 2003 Balakin peated cask. It's bottled at 52% ABV, and the nose has notes of burned fig cookies, a touch of dates, toasted raisin bread, grilled citrus fruits, and a hint of honey. The taste is thick, oily, chewy, and peppery, with a nice balance of grilled fruits, peat smoke, and honey. Adding some water opens up the fruity notes along with some baking chocolate. The finish is long and smoky, with a touch of bitter baking chocolate, and I'm scoring the Equilibrium 10-year-old single malt a 94. McRailed and McClune, sounds a lot like an Edinburgh law firm, have also bottled more conventional single casks, including a 25-year-old 1995 single grain from the long-gone Caperdonick Distillery. It was matured in a refill ex-sherry hogshead cask and bottled at 52% ABV. The nose on this one has notes of Christmas cake, fresh berries, dried apples, a hint of dried flowers, hazelnut, and a gentle oakiness. The taste has a good balance of fruitiness and peppery notes along with fresh berries, red apples, a hint of hazelnut, and dried flowers. The finish is long, well-balanced, and gentle. I'm scoring the Whiskey Sponge Caperdonick 1995 single grain a 94. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, the award-winning rye whiskey distillery based in Baltimore, Maryland. Try their signature cask and double oak rye whiskies, each one a proprietary blend of high and low rye mash bills. Sagamore Spirit has mastered the transformational art of blending. Learn more at sagamorespirit.com. Please drink responsibly. We are less than a month away from the U.S. Open Golf Tournament at Torrey Pines in San Diego. Dewar's has become the official Scotch whiskey of the U.S. Open and will release a commemorative Champions Edition 19-year-old blended Scotch each year, with part of the proceeds from each bottle going to the USGA Foundation. This year's debut edition is finished in first fill ex-bourbon barrels and bottled at 43% ABV. The nose has a citrusy tartness along with touches of honeycomb, black tea with lemon, and a hint of green apples. The taste has notes of lemon pepper, ginger, black tea, honey, citrus, and green apples, while the finish is long with a citrusy tartness. I'm scoring the Dewar's 2021 Champions Edition blended Scotch a 92. We have been doing some spring cleaning around the WhiskyCast studio and found some samples that slipped through the cracks over the years. That includes a 35-year-old Brora from Diageo's 2012 Special Releases series. And with Brora reopening this month, I decided it was finally time to taste this one. It was bottled at 48.1% ABV. The nose is aromatic and well-balanced with notes of caramel, butterscotch, subtle spices, and a hint of oak, along with touches of dark chocolate and straw. The taste is vibrant, fruity, and peppery, with hints of butterscotch, apricots, honey, and dark chocolate. The finish, long and luscious. I should have tasted this one a lot sooner, but it was well worth the wait. I'm scoring the 35-year-old Brora from Diageo's 2012 Special Releases series a 94. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of more than 3,100 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the inbox now for your voice. Last time around, I took a wrecking ball to the myth of the neck pour, a theory that some whiskey lovers have been passing around that claims the first inch or two of whiskey at the top of a new bottle becomes tainted by exposure to the air between the top of the whiskey and the cork or screw cap. As you might expect, there were quite a few comments, but no neck pour advocates came forth to argue with me, at least to my face. Tony Watson at HPC Advisors in Tampa, Florida, tweeted this: "If only my whiskey society could read. They love talking neck pours." From Joel at Odysseus Unbound on Twitter, I forget who said it first, but the best response to this I've heard is, "The whiskey didn't change, your palate did." Gavin at No Zephyr on Twitter had this cheeky response: "I'm volunteering to take everyone's neck pours off their hands free of charge." Here's a comment on Chris Ratcliffe's story last week on how whiskey makers are using blockchain technology to make their production more transparent. From Benjamin Reed on Twitter at Ranger Rick, "Wait, someone is using the blockchain for its lone, actually arguably useful reason? Now I have to listen to this." If there is something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always get in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at WhiskyCast. The email address, comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and other things that make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. The basics of distillation have been known to distillers for more than 500 years, at least, and the coffee still, Aeneas Coffee's legendary column still design that is still used to this day, is also known as the patent still because coffee received a patent for its design. While new inventions can generally be patented, patents can also be issued for a new process. And that's the case in Australia, where there is now a controversy over the patent issued to Sydney's Archie Rose Distillery for the process it uses to distill its malt whiskies. The fact that the patent was even issued in the first place has other Australian distillers upset. Spirits writer James Atkinson has been following this dispute and joins me via Zoom from Sydney. James, basically explain what's going on here.
Okay, well, Archie Rose, who, may be familiar to some of your listeners, they won the world's best rye whiskey at the World Whiskies Awards a couple of years ago. So they're starting to make a name for themselves on the international stage. And they've just recently opened a new production distillery. It's the biggest distillery in Australia, and it's undoubtedly innovative. There's a lot of really unique functionality built into the distillery that gives Archie Rose control at every stage of the process. And last year they put out a press release, it was in November, that referred to their patented whiskey production process. And this was the first anyone in the industry had heard about what Archie Rose had been doing behind the scenes, because they actually originally applied for the patent in May 2018. And I think it says something about, the fact that the industry here is in its infancy, that not one person is keeping an eye on patent applications. But meanwhile, the patent got certified in early 2020, and the patent is titled A Method for Making a Composite Alcoholic Beverage. And it refers to the individual malt stream process that Archie Rose says is going to underpin its whiskey production. And so it provides that every individual malt in a 6-malt mash bill is milled, brewed, fermented, distilled, and matured separately or alongside a single base malt. So once those separate streams have all gone, maturation in different barrel types, then at the end of the process, Archie Rose is blending them to come up with its final whiskey. And the patent also provides that final whiskey must also contain 2 streams of roasted malt. So it's obviously a fairly unusual process, but there's certainly been a lot of consternation around whether it's really it's so innovative that it could have been patented.
Yeah, because that sounds like something, for instance, Canadian distillers have been doing, for, say, the last 150 years or so, is distilling each grain separately and then blending them after maturation. And it doesn't seem like that is that unique.
Well, that's certainly the argument of Cameron Syme, the founder of another well-known Australian distillery, Limeburners in Western Australia, who has come out and decided to challenge the patent. He claims that he has been doing something very similar for 7 years prior to Archie Rose, but he chose not to patent it. His, way of handling intellectual property is what he calls more the KFC or Coca-Cola school of thought, which is that if you've got your secret recipe, you don't put it out in a patent for the whole world to see. You play your cards very close to your chest and basically keep employees quiet with confidentiality agreements. And so I guess that's the issue, is that, these patent examiners, they have to go and search and find what they can that's out there. But just because they can't find a patent doesn't mean that someone else is not already doing it and keeping their process to themselves. And so Cameron says he's got half a dozen Australian distillers that have definitely been doing this for longer than Archie Rose. And I know that now this is getting some interest in overseas markets, because since they were successful in Australia, the patent is now before authorities in various other overseas markets. So I think those overseas bodies are sort of waiting and watching and hoping that the patent gets knocked over here so that they don't have to challenge it themselves.
I know that at least in the U.S. there's a concept, and I think I'm trying to remember it correctly, of prior craft or prior use that would negate a lot of patents. Neither you nor I are Australian patent lawyers or experts, but has that come up? Is that basically the gist of what Cameron and his colleagues in the community are worried about, or at least arguing on this?
Yeah, I think that they refer to the concept of prior art. That's the terminology that I think is probably international. And what that means is that you can find an example, somewhere else in the world of someone having done this prior to Archie Rose. And, Cameron has got some texts that some sort of academic texts that he thinks refer to fairly similar processes. Like he mentioned Canadian whiskey. And, he, in the case of roasted malts, he makes the point that, Glenmorangie Signet's been around for 20 years. So all of those things combined, he hopes and expects might be able to knock the patent on the head. But I can tell you that, I've been writing about, spirits in Australia for the last 10 years, and I've never seen the level of interest in a story that I've worked on that I have with this. There's been certainly a lot. It's a very emotive issue in Australia.
What does Archie Rose say in terms of defending this? I know about a year and a half ago when I was down there in Sydney, we toured the distillery with Dave Withers when it was still under construction. But he didn't say anything about this process at the time, I don't believe. But at the time, it was just an impressive set of concrete slabs where they were going to put everything, and the stills were going in and things like that.
Well, look, there's an article on their website that, your listeners can go and read. And the title is, "What is the individual malt stream process behind our whiskies, and why have we patented it?" And so that kind of tells you everything that you need to know about, where they sort of stand on the issue. The key thing that the key point they've made to me is that Archie Rose likes to be able to share what it's doing with people and be quite open about its processes. And they felt that because of the level of investment they put into this new distillery and some of these processes that I referred to earlier on, they were concerned that if they sort of let everyone know exactly what they're doing, then whiskey being the way whiskey is, that someone else could bring a product to market before them, or they might feel pressure to bring a product to market before it reaches peak maturity, whereas someone else in Australia might just release a whiskey that does something similar at the 2-year mark, the minimum 2-year mark, that you can put it out and call it whiskey.
What about the whiskeys they already have out in the market that have won awards and that are good? The ones I've tasted were very good. Were those made using this process, or is this an all-new thing they've developed this new distillery around?
I think this new distillery has given them extra points of flex that they wouldn't have had at the Rosebery distillery, and I can remain to be corrected on that. But certainly, Archie Rose has had the 6 malt new make out on the market, and the single malt that came out last year, it definitely does have some roasted malt streams in it. But I think the difference would be that, with this new distillery, there's just much more control around every step of the process with milling and mashing and fermentation, so that, there are so many permutations for each whiskey in their barrel store. So they're going to have, if you imagine at every step of the process, if you make some small tweak and then you're putting all those different whiskey streams in different barrels, then you end up with a huge array of casks from which to blend your final product. And that's what they're arguing is innovative and inventive.
And I would imagine more economical to do it this way in the new distillery, because having seen the original, I think they maybe had, one set of stills or 2 sets of stills, and to do 6 different malts, that would have taken a lot of work and a lot of cleaning in between still runs. They would have had to do those all separately, and it would have been a lot more complex to do it in that small distillery that they started out with.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is really, sort of a custom designed distillery that's all based around the process that I've described.
Where do you see this heading out? You've talked to folks on both sides.
Well, where it's at right now is, I think, Cameron Syme from Limeburners is, sort of still in a fact-finding in a fact-finding stage. He's in the process of getting affidavits from some of those distillers who I mentioned, who also claim to have been using a similar process prior to Archie Rose. I think that's going to be a bit of a challenging process in itself, because those distillers that don't want to kind of, unveil all of their processes to everyone, there's probably going to have to be content that's redacted from the public record. And I think, the next step is applying for a re-examination of the patent. In Australia, you can, if you've got evidence, if you've got prior art that the patent examiner missed, then you can apply for a re-examination. It costs $5,000, so it's not a hugely expensive thing. And yeah, I imagine, as these things always do, that'll all take a while. There is another legal avenue to sort of go down the route of a federal court challenge, but that would be very expensive. And I think, financially, I can't sort of see one distillery going down that path. The other thing that just occurred to me is Cameron made the point that, patent examiners not being industry experts, Archie Rose referred to roasted malts in its patent, and patent examiners are not going to know that roasted malts is kind of interchangeable with specialty malts. So they wouldn't have picked up any of the other documentations that are out there using that different terminology. And he reckons there's a lot more using the terminology specialty malt.
Have the folks at Archie Rose indicated whether they would try to enforce this and stop other distillers from using their proprietary processes if it's too similar to this one?
Well, they haven't, but then, why would you go through the process if you weren't going to enforce it? Because it's an expensive process to go through, and especially now the international phase, dealing with patent authorities and all these different markets, it's a very costly experience. So the question remains, why would you do it if you weren't then going to enforce this intellectual property that you've got the rights to?
Which countries have they applied in? Do you know offhand?
Last time I checked, I definitely can remember seeing it was in EU, China, Canada, and I'm pretty sure they've applied in pretty much every country that you would think of when it comes to whiskey production, put it that way.
I suspect the Canadian Patent Office is going to look at this and do a quick cursory search and go, oh, no, because our guys have been doing this for 150 years, and I suspect the prior art, and that's the term I was looking for, is going to very much come to play in this. I could be wrong, but I suspect that's what's going to happen eventually.
Yeah, well, it's a watch this space. It's an interesting one.
And we'll trust you to keep watching this space for us. Thank you, James Atkinson, based in Sydney, a spirits and whiskey writer. Thanks again for your time, James.
No worries, Mark.
James is also the host of the Drinks Adventures podcast, covering a world of spirits, and available wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, I toured the new Archie Rose Distillery in Sydney in 2019 while it was still under construction. You can listen to that tour with Master Distiller Dave Withers in episode 782 of WhiskyCast. It's in the archives at our website. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copperpot. The tears of Ireland's great writers bursting with flavour, humour and angst. Bottled for you to taste. No writers were harmed in the making of this premium Irish whiskey. Writer's Tears Copperpot.
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of all of our past episodes since 2005. We'd love to hear from you. You can always get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Obrigado. That's Portuguese for thank you. All right, so I'm not exactly fluent, but I've learned a thing or two telling the story of Dewar's Portuguese Smooth. It's finished in port barrels for a smooth, rich taste you won't find in any other whiskey. I may not be able to tell you where to find the best pastillas de nata in Lisbon, but I know how to say thank you. So obrigado, and cheers to staying curious.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2021, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and please stay safe.